So, looking back over the last couple of decades, Iran's relationship with the US has been anything but static. Remember, right after 9/11, there were these surprising moments of cooperation, especially in Afghanistan.
I know, that almost feels like a plot twist now. Iran actually shared intelligence with the US to help take down the Taliban wild, considering everything that followed. It didn't last long, though. Bush's axis of evil speech totally torpedoed any hopes for a longer détente.
Exactly, and that speech set the tone for years of confrontation. Then came the nuclear revelations, sanctions, and a whole era of shadowboxing between Iran and the West.
And what's fascinating is how those US invasions Afghanistan and Iraq removed two big threats for Iran, but also put American troops right on Iran's doorstep. That really amped up Iran's sense of vulnerability and fed into their whole proxy strategy.
Speaking of that escalation, it's hard not to get whiplash from the sanctions and nuclear diplomacy cycle. By 2010, the sanctions were brutal, hitting Iran's oil, banks, shipping. Yet, somehow, that pressure nudged everyone to the negotiating table.
Totally. The sanctions crescendo forced Iran to get creative, turning to allies like Syria and Hezbollah, but also inching toward a diplomatic opening. The interim deal in 2013 paved the way for the JCPOA, which, for a brief moment, looked like a real breakthrough.
But the optimism didn't last. After Trump pulled the US out of the deal in 2018, it was back to maximum pressure oil exports, nosedived, and Iran slowly ramped up its nuclear program again.
That whipsaw effect deal, withdrawal, retaliation, just fueled more mistrust on both sides. And as each side doubled down, the risk of direct conflict went way up, especially with all those tanker attacks and the Soleimani strike.
You brought up the Soleimani strike. That was a turning point. For years, the US and Iran kind of fought through proxies or covert actions. But in 2020, a US drone actually killed Iran's top commander. That was huge.
It was, and Iran's ballistic missile response on US bases in Iraq made it feel like the gloves were coming off. Still, up until very recently, the confrontation mostly happened outside Iran's borders.
But that's changed. Reports from 2025 say the US finally hit actual Iranian facilities on Iranian soil. That's a historic shift, the first direct bombing since the 1979 revolution.
It almost redefines the entire conflict, moving from shadow wars and regional skirmishes to outright strikes in Iran itself. That leap raises the stakes for everyone involved, not just Iran and the US.
That actually reminds me. Iran's strategy has always been this mix of strengths and vulnerabilities. Geographically, it's in a prime spot, plus all that oil and a hefty population. But the chronic economic mess and sanctions really drag it down.
What stands out to me is how they've tried to turn their weaknesses into leverage. Sanctions isolated their economy, so they doubled down on missile, drone, and cyber capabilities. Plus, building networks with groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis lets them punch above their weight regionally.
Right, and on top of that, they're always balancing how far to push. They escalate just enough to gain bargaining chips, like inching up nuclear enrichment, but not so much that it triggers full-scale war.
There's also a pragmatism there, despite all the revolutionary rhetoric. Iran courts Russia and China now, not just for economic survival, but to dilute US power globally. Very much a hedging, multi-layered approach.
Funny you say that because Iran's internal dynamics are pretty intense too. There's this tension between the hardline leadership and a younger, urban population that's hungry for jobs and more freedom. Sometimes that boils over, like with the protests.
Absolutely. And it's not just the politics, environmental stress, like water scarcity and pollution, adds fuel to the fire. Then there's technology. Iran lags in many areas, yet has made surprising leaps in military tech, especially under pressure.
And let's not forget the legal web. All those sanctions, regimes, and non-proliferation rules create a constant source of external constraint. It's like Iran is always negotiating not just with the US, but the entire international order.
That's what makes the current moment so precarious, not just one crisis, but a tangle of economic, social, and geopolitical pressures, all playing off each other. No wonder things feel so brittle right now.
After all these cycles, the big question is, where does it go from here? The US and Iran are both trying to avoid all-out war, but direct strikes and proxy clashes keep inching them closer to the edge.
It's a dangerous game of escalation management. Short term, I'd expect more tit-for-tat attacks and cyber moves, maybe even more direct exchanges. But without a new diplomatic approach, the risk of something spinning out of control is always there.
Meanwhile, Iran's leaning harder into Russia and China, while the U.S. juggles alliances and tries to keep the region from blowing up. That fragmentation could reshape not just the Middle East, but global power balances too.
The catch is, every actor has limited options and real risks: sanctions, internal unrest, nuclear proliferation. Unless someone finds a way to break the cycle, the whole system is set up for recurring crises. It's high stakes, with a lot riding on the next moves from both sides.